returning to our topic of Tantra psychology, I want to relate the concepts that we've discussed so far with the Tantric concept of the chakras. So to recap what we've done so far, we talked about how our experience comes to us in 5 elements. There is the element of smell. It's one component of our experience. Taste, sight, touch, sound. Those collectively create what we call our physical world experience. And then next is the mind. Behind those 5 physical senses, you have 5 mental senses that create a mental world that can contain all of those 5 elements. And included in that mind are 3 major functions, one being cogitation, the other being insight or determination, and then the third being the I maker or the ego, which stitches all this together into an experience of an individual self, a self that is separate from the world around us, separate from other selves. All of that is due to the ego function, taking these various other functions that are going on and knitting them together, arrogating them toward a single point, a single center of consciousness. Behind or above all of those processes, you have pure consciousness, some kind called Chit or Shiva. Not Shiva, the Hindu god exactly, but Shiva as a philosophical concept in Tantra means pure consciousness, sometimes called the ocean of immortality or ocean of nectar. There's all kinds of metaphorical language used to describe what is simply a background of awareness behind which all of our experience happens, and by whose agency, by the agency of which we do have these experiences. If there were not awareness, consciousness, as it were, flowing through these functions, there would be no awareness. To use our flashlight metaphor, to return to that, the flashlight can spin all it wants, or we can spin the flashlight all we want to create a circle in the dark, and that's nice. There's a circle, and that's what we think of as self. But what is the essential element of that? It's the light of the flashlight that flows uninterrupted. Now it can jump all over the place because it's getting moved by these functions. But the actual flow of the light is continuous and uninterrupted, no matter where we move it. So it is with consciousness, and light is the most common metaphor in Tantra, certainly, for consciousness. Light is a good metaphor for consciousness. It's not the same thing. Physical light and consciousness are not exactly the same, but they have qualities in common. One of them is they each fill a space as soon as they enter it. You go into a room, turn on a light, boom. The light doesn't creep around the room. It fills the whole room at once. And in doing so, they both reveal what is there. So the room is dark, you don't know what is in there. You turn on the light, boom. light fills the space and instantly reveals anything and everything within the room. So also it is with consciousness, that when it shines, as it were, through our phenomenal being, it has a certain experience, creates a certain experience through these various functions of what is called an individual or jiva in the world. So the chakra system then represents this process in a fixed visual form. You have that pure consciousness represented as the 1,000-petaled lotus in the head. It's a very wonderful image, fanciful image, but pure consciousness represented in that 1,000-petaled lotus. Then in the 2-petaled lotus between the eyes, you have mind represented. In the throat, you have the sense of sound. In the heart, you have a sense of touch. In the solar plexus, a sense of sight. Sexual organ, you have a sense of taste. And at the bottom of this chakra system, the root chakra, you have the sense of smell. So the concept is this spatial concept of higher to lower, is that consciousness evolves, as it were, creates itself through these different modalities, and in doing so creates an increasingly solid, often translated as gross, solid experience of the world as a physical, fixed, real physical place in which we have real individual experiences. Now, as individuals, that's where we start out, is having these experiences. We don't know anything about consciousness, whatever. Consciousness just happens. It just flows through us. Our first thought arose from that consciousness, and all our subsequent thoughts and experiences also, as it were, arise from that consciousness, because without awareness, without consciousness, none of that could be happening. That's one of the reasons within Tantra philosophy that consciousness, chit, is equated with sat, being. Sat and chit, being and consciousness, are like two sides of the same coin. You can't have being without consciousness, nor consciousness without being. The concepts are absurd. Anyway, back to the chakras. So, evolution of consciousness is downward. And normally think of evolution as a good thing. And it's good in the sense that we have a certain experience that prepares us then for enlightenment, which is the goal of Tantra. How to achieve that goal, how to dissolve or reverse or devolve our experience of the world back into its source. That's where the chakra system is used in Tantra as points of concentration that help us analyze, that is, break into its parts, break into its 5 elements, that experience of the world, of the quote-unquote external world, in such a way that we see that it is not discrete, separate physical things, but rather consciousness manifesting as these various experiences, both physical and mental. So by, as it were, dissolving each of those sense experiences back into their source and consciousness, going from the bottom of the chakras up to the top, then identity gets dissolved into its parts, and those parts get dissolved into their source. And when you actually do that, not just imagine it, but actually do it, then you become enlightened. Now, I say when you actually do that, not just imagine it, I don't mean to denigrate imagination, because one of the chief tools in Tantra for accomplishing this shift in identity is imagination. And the chakra system is used as a way to visualize this process in a very practical way that helps dissolve our experience of self in the world as an individual, separate individual, and realize ourself, the true self, big S, as infinite awareness, the ground of being. Shiva, as it's called in Tantra, Parama Shiva. So the Jiva Shiva, this individual, gets absorbed into Parama Shiva, and we become enlightened. It's not the end of the process. We'll go on about that later, but for now, that's the fundamental process of enlightenment and how the chakra system is related to that.